You're in Braves country.
Good afternoon, good evening, Braves country. We finally have movement in the Atlanta Braves community. If you're just finding this out, Jurickson Profar is an Atlanta Brave. And it's been a long time. I guess I just had to bitch and moan long enough for it to finally happen. If you missed the show yesterday, I said I wasn't doing another show until there's actually news that drops because there's no point in it. And less than 24 hours later, Jurickson Profar, there's the picture of him right there, outfielder. We'll get into that here in 1 second. I just want to get you an idea. I'm sure a lot of people don't know who he is or very familiar with who he is. But nonetheless, we have Jurickson Profar heading to the Atlanta Braves. And I will go ahead and start my video. And I did this on the fly. That's why the camera's all cattywampus. The news broke officially about, we'll say 20 minutes ago, but I didn't get it actually confirmed until about just momentarily before we came on. Right before we put this up was the first. I was in the studio and I was working on clips for this coming season. And long story short, I looked over at a couple of alerts and text messages and emails that I got from folks in the business, and I look over and go, "What the hell's going on?" And all of a sudden, it's flashing on the screen. Jeff Passan, I believe, is the one that originally broke it, but they're all breaking it at the same time. We don't have the official details on the contract yet, and we probably won't get them for a little bit, but nonetheless, Jurickson Profar is an Atlanta Braves, and really not a big deal one way or the other. Robert, I would say it's probably a somewhat friendly deal because we're getting late into it. And the last time that this happened to Profar, he ended up signing like a really cheap deal going back to the Padres. But this year, he's coming off a pretty good season, and we'll get into his numbers here in 1 second. But I do want to double check and make sure that it's just all that's being said is that he has. Here we go. According to Rob Murray, and we don't know if this is 100% sure, but there are some rumors floating around. 3 years, $42 million, and I will. I'll put that up in the chat here in 1 second. But 3 years, $42 million is what it's looking like. And so that tells you something right there. What that tells you is that they're looking towards the future on this as well. It tells you that a guy like a Jared Kelenic could be on the move. Now, I would think that they want to hold on to Kelenic until at least they're for sure Acuna's coming back. But eventually you're going to have a log jam because obviously in center field you have Michael Harris, and when Acuna comes back, you obviously have Ronald Acuna Jr. out in right field. So left field right now is looking like when Acuna comes back, it would be Profar. Profar is a left fielder. He's a switch-hitting left fielder. We'll get on his numbers here in a second. But he is a guy that, has won the Silver Slugger Award with the Padres. He's a hitter, guys. He is not someone that they brought in to just kind of go about and play defense and be a warm body. He's a guy that doesn't hit for a ton of power, but he does have pop in his bat. And we'll pull up his numbers here in 1 second just so you're familiar with him. But he's really more known of a of a 5-tool player, but I don't want to get over my skis and just refer to him as a 5-tool player, because Honest Engine is, he's not the type of 5-tool player when you think of like a Michael Harris, but he is still a pretty solid player. He's a good base runner. He's a good hitter. He hit 280 last year with 24 home runs in 158 games, and 85 RBIs, 158 hits. So now that was a very, very good year for him. But I'll get into the details of him here in 1 second, pulling up his numbers for his career. But essentially what you're talking about there is you're talking about, what is that, a $14 million deal? That means in theory, and there's so many arguments going back and forth. But if that breaks down to $14 million a year, and we'll just say that for argument's sake, it means the Braves still have somewhere between 10 to possibly as high as 17 or 18 million left. But you get conflicting reports from different sites of how much they have left. But I would say they at least have 8 to 9 left. But whether or not they're going to spend that now or hold on to it like we talked about yesterday, and I know a lot of fans aren't exactly in love with this idea, but we talked about this yesterday. The Atlanta Braves never have any money when they come down to the trading deadline to play with. And everyone's like, oh, and you get the same old tired-ass, uneducated answer from fans on Twitter X of, all that money could be made in the battery and blah, blah. It's a separate deal. And until you understand that, I can't stand here and argue with you. It's a separate deal. But we're talking about the money that the Braves can spend with their franchise and not get, because I'm telling you right now, and I've been saying this for weeks, months, anybody who's listened to the show can tell you that. Last night, I actually saw one of the beat writers finally come out and say it and admit it. And maybe he's just finally getting his head out of his ass. I don't know what the deal is, or he finally felt brave enough to say it. But he was commenting. He had a long thread on X, and basically what he said was, there's a very good chance that the Braves are trying to reset that value and not go over the luxury tax. Because if you go over the luxury tax this year for a third consecutive year, then it just gets worse every single year. And you may not want to hear that when you see the LA Dodgers out there spending $380 million. But at some point, you've got to understand, we are not in Los Angeles. We are not a big market team. We are one of the top 10 markets in baseball, but we're not one of the top 2 or 3. So there are limitations. And the idea that you may have to reset and try to win with what you got is not an absurd assumption. I've been saying that for the longest time. I thought they would sign one player, but don't go crazy and think that they're obviously going to go on some spending spree and spend $50 or $60 million in the offseason, because you end up kicking through. You don't have to pay $1.50 over. You have to pay $1.50 for every dollar you spend over the cap, and then you also lose the draft compensation. And then next year it gets worse. And the next year it gets worse. But if you do not go over it this year, you reset your market going into 2026. But I do think the Braves want to compete every year, and they definitely want to be competitive on the year that they're going to host the All-Star game. If they weren't hosting the All-Star game, I could see them even trying to go to the post with the roster that we had going into, we'll just say yesterday. But I always felt like they were going to do something, and I always felt like it was more likely that we were going to try to get a bat. And I still think there's money or a trade to be made, to be made by the Braves for some pitching. More likely what they're looking for, because right now, for my count, there are 3 open slots, bare minimum, possibly 4 in that bullpen, if you're being realistic. And where do the Braves go with that? One of the guys that's out there, by the way, that nobody's talking about, And he had a good year, and I know he's not a flamethrower, and I know that he's older pitcher, but he's a fan favorite. Jesse Chavez is still there. He's still a free agent, and he made another statement this week to one of the. It wasn't a Braves writer. It was one of the other West Coast writers that he was around. He said he is definitely planning on playing in 2025. So my guess is this: he either comes back to the Braves or he goes and pitches with his buddy up in Baltimore with Charlie Morton. And you're not going to have to spend anything more than league minimum on him. Even though he's coming off a good year, Jesse Chavez knows who he is. Jesse Chavez knows that there's no way in hell that he's going to go out there and, spend, get a team to spend a lot of money on a guy who tops out at about 90 miles an hour, maybe a touch below on some days, and really is a guy that at this point in his career, it's only been 2 or 3 seasons ago that Jesse Chavez was the bridge to the final 2 innings for the Braves. And then he broke his leg and came back and blah, blah, blah. But even last year, Braves were consistently using him in the 6th inning, sometimes even into the 7th. Every great once in a while, depending on the depletion of the bullpen usage, you're talking about him being used, as deep as the 8th on a couple occasions. But anyway, you look at it, I still think he is a cheap add that the Braves could definitely add. If you're just joining us, Jurickson, and I know this wasn't a planned show. This is why I have these set up so I can just go in and go live. And as soon as I could get it fired up, we came to you. So I don't expect us to have a ton of people jumping in right now. Everybody's getting caught flat-footed by this. But just moments ago, Jurickson Profar agreed to a 3-year, $42 million deal with the Atlanta Braves. What we're going to do right now is take a look at what that means because, and I won't keep you long tonight. We'll probably jump off here by the top of the hour. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what that means because you're looking at adding Jurickson Profar. He's going to be a top of the lineup guy because in that Braves offense, they're going to try to extend the lineup, make it longer. And what does that mean? That means that you continue to try to give enough length in that lineup where you don't have dead holes until the bottom. I still think we're probably going to end up with Orlando Arcia playing shortstop and batting ninth. And there's not a whole hell of a lot that can be done about it because there's nothing out there on the market. There are some platoon options. We won't get into that today, but there are some platoon options. If you get a cheap enough platoon option, the Braves may very well bring that in. By the way, the Angels signed Tim Anderson to a minor league deal. You talk about how quickly the mighty have fallen. I mean, Tim Anderson just a few years ago, before he got knocked out by Jose Ramirez, he was looked upon as one of the better offensive shortstops in baseball. And just before that incident, he fell off the face of the earth, and he has never rebounded. Of course, there's always talk about as well that that he has a lot of attitude problems in the locker room. It's not just what we saw on the field with Jose Ramirez. So 3 years, $42 million. That's the big takeaway that we're doing right now. Jurickson Profar, if you're just joining us, he signs a 3-year, $42 million. First reported by Jeff Passan and a couple other guys. And then Murphy, I believe that was his name, Murphy, Robert Murray, excuse me, has reported that it's 3 years, $42 million. And it looks like everybody else is agreeing with that as well. Bob Nightingale, a couple of others. So anyways, reputable sources, not only Mark Bowman, Justin Toscano. So Braves guys, national guys, they're all out there letting you know that it's a done deal. So Jurickson Profar played for the Padres last year, and just bear with me because I'm trying to do this on the fly. Normally I have all this stuff set up as I'm about to talk to you, but the biggest concern to me about this is we're paying $14 million a year, a 3-year deal on a guy that's 32. So by the time this ends, when is his birthday? Not that it realistically matters. He was born in September. So by the time this ends, he'll be 35. Okay. That's a little concerning because his athletic ability is a big draw. But what you did see from Profar last year, and the argument I'm going to make for it is this. In 2023, he did not play well at all. He was in Colorado, and everybody kind of jumped on the whole, how the hell do you not play well in Colorado? That's a hitter's park. But he goes back to San Diego, where he's been very familiar, and he goes out. He has a 3.6 WAR, 158 games, and 668 plate appearances, 24 home runs, 85 RBI. We just went over there, and also 10 stolen bases. So he is a stolen base threat. He's not what you would, he's not an Acuna or a Harris per se, but he'll pick his marks to steal. He was much more prolific in stealing, we'll say 4 or 5 years ago. Before 2023, he was with the Padres, and he had a 3 WAR in 2022. The Padres didn't want to pay him. They let him go to Colorado, had a bad year. Now, the Padres ended up getting him in a trade at the deadline, and he went from a negative 1.7 WAR in Colorado to a .4 WAR in just 14 games when he went back to San Diego. Prior to that, he was with San Diego for 3 years. He was with he came out with the Texas Rangers in 2012, and he's missed some time because of injury. But all in all, he's been pretty healthy, and he's been pretty productive. He's not really a guy that that you would say you expect to be in the middle of the lineup. So I expect him to either be at the top, towards the top of the lineup, or they're going to have him in just below, we'll say 6th or 7th, right? I don't think they would hit him 9th because, once again, I believe that's going to be Arcia unless they decide to put Arcia at 8th and Profar at 9th. So I'm talking about after Acuna comes back, so that Arcia's not clogging up the base paths. But what you're looking at with him on a regular basis, I don't think 24 is likely, but 15 to 20 home runs is pretty likely. And 280 is the highest he's ever hit, except for in 2020, which is a small sample size. Obviously, he hit 278. Typically, he's hitting around the 240 to 250 range. So you're talking about a guy who is a lighter hitting outfielder, but he's always been pretty good with the glove. I would not put him up there with the top defensive outfielders, but I also don't think he's also not like a liability like a Marcell Ozuna. The other thing you have to realize, in 2026, Marcell Ozuna comes off the books. He'll be a free agent. Now, whether or not the Braves bring him back or not, I don't know. I don't think it's ideal to have Jurickson Profar as your DH. So if they end up trying to let's say Ozuna walks, the designated hitter role opens up more for someone like an Acuna, because they're trying to keep his bat in the lineup and him not getting injured out in the field. You could see days where, and this is next season, but you could see days where they end up going to Olsen or whatever. But I think in a perfect world, they're going to try to get Ozuna signed to bring him back for another couple of years. Because remember, Ozuna is only 35 years old, and as a designated hitter, and the way he clubs the ball, I will compare him to a Nelson Cruz if you remember him. I think he can be productive into his late 30s. So when you're looking at what he's going to bring to the field, he is a offensive player, and defensively he is pretty much looked upon in his standard fielding. I'll give you an idea. Let me see. Last year, where did he rank at? Last year, his fielding percentage was actually pretty darn good. Now it's for outfielders, so keep it in mind. But .996 fielding percentage. You look in that was at 148 games in the field. And so, all in all, the guy is a solid overall round player, and he's a great add to the Braves because we now have someone that can play left field for the whole season. I think the idea is going to be until Acuna can come back, Kelenic can play a solid defensive right field. They'll keep Profar in left field. He's not a right fielder. If you've watched Jurickson Profar over his career, he's just not a right fielder. He originally came up as an infielder, by the way. And there was in fact, last year, he actually played one game at first base, which I was not aware of that. He's played first base 2023 for the Padres 5 games. But he's typically, when he first came up, he was a middle infielder, and he did play some third. But he transitioned into outfield essentially the 2019 season. He never really looked back. He has filled in at second base over the last 4 or 5 years, and he has played primarily left field. In a jam, they'll try to put him somewhere else, but he doesn't have the arm strength to play right. So all in all, Robert, I don't know why you care about that. So anyways, all in all, I think this is a huge get because he was definitely the best outfield bat left. He's not the best bat left. The best, something that would have actually shook us to the core would have been an Alex Bregman or a Pete Alonso signing. But considering our needs, that's not likely. That was never likely. I made the joke yesterday that, screw it, let's just back up the truck and jam Pete Alonso out in left field. But if you've ever seen Pete Alonso play first base, you think that's bad? Can you imagine him out in the outfield? And Bregman is going to break the bank. I still believe Alex Bregman's going to sign with the Red Sox. We're just waiting for that shoe to drop. Anyone got any questions or comments? As I'll keep this up going a little longer. I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited that something finally happened, right? I mean, we've been sitting here all offseason just going, good God, every single guy. And I know we didn't go out and sign the best free agent available. I get it. There's going to be teams that are going to roll their eyes or scoff. If you go on social media, you're going to run into jacklegs. They're going to tell you that Jurickson Profar isn't any good and we shouldn't have paid this much for him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if we were going to have a lineup changing bat for our offense, that's it. That's all that was left. There is no big name shortstop out there. And there really isn't a right fielder out there this season. And Profar coming in, I think one of the best things about Profar, other than the fact that he does have a good ability to get on base, that I've always seen with him, it seems like he's well liked by his teammates and everyone. He's always got a smile on his face. And so I think that's a big deal. It seems like that he would be a good fit. We talked about this early in the offseason, but Jurickson Profar is from Curacao, and there was talks about him wanting to come and play with the Braves because he's friends with Ozzie Albies, who's also from Curacao. So that probably had something to do with it. But regardless, by the way, they had it miswritten. He's 31. He's 31. And what this is showing is, okay, so he'll be 32 at the beginning of this season. So he'll be 34 at the end of the contract. Late into his 34th year, but 34 at the end of the contract. So I think that's a good sign. I mean, if he's friends with Ozzie Albies, you would think that means that he's a guy of high character and outgoing personality like Ozzie. Like I said, that's what I've always gotten from Jurickson Profar. Let me see if there's any other. Robert's asking about pitchers. Robert, there's really nothing out there. The best starting pitcher, if you're talking about starting pitchers, Jack Flaherty's the number one guy, but it doesn't look like that the Braves will be willing to pay because he's asking for what I believe is past his value. He is looking at himself as just a ring below the guys who signed in this offseason. Got guys like Corbin Burns, Blake Snell, and Max Fried. He looks at himself as the ring just below that, and he's not. He's just not. Would I love to add him? Yeah, I'd love to see Jack Flaherty on a short deal because he's had some injury problems. He's had some control problems. He's had other issues. I do think that it all stems from some of his injuries that he has. And he pitched pretty well last year, but he was by no means one of the guys that carried the Dodgers. In fact, he was a hindrance. In the playoffs, he was getting racked. And that's not what you want if you're going to push the chips in. You got to remember, y'all, one thing about the Braves is they have a lot of really good young pitchers, and you're going to have to use somewhere between 10 to a dozen starting pitchers, best case scenario, in a season. And as far as making a trade, it looks more and more like they're not willing to make the trade because they want that depth. They don't want to give away A.J. Smith-Shawver. They don't want to give away Hurston Waldrop. Ian Anderson's going to get every opportunity to make the team in whatever capacity. Because the thing about Ian Anderson is that he is out of options. So the Braves either put him on the opening day roster or they DFA him or they trade him. There's no other option. You cannot put Ian Anderson down in the minor leagues this year unless he gets injured. And if he knows he has an opportunity to possibly go start somewhere, Ian Anderson's probably not willing to do a phantom injury, right? So in all likelihood, he's going to be given. That's the biggest thing that I'm going to be looking for in the spring is who's going to fill those last 3, maybe even 4 roles in the bullpen, and who's going to open the season as the number 5 starter. Because right now, we know that we've got a pretty darn good 3-headed monster in Chris Sale, Schwellenbach, and Raylo. And then you've got a few others, including Ian Anderson, who are going to be fighting for that 5th spot. And so if you just look at the Braves and you look at the way that they are constructing this team, I really feel like what they're waiting for is Spencer Strider to come back. Spencer Strider comes back, but they're not going to rush him. If you're not going to rush him, you're going to need depth. So that's what we're looking at right now. Braves will we'll see. They could still make a couple of moves, and I still wouldn't put it past them to make a few more deals. Most likely, more likely in the trade aspect. There's not a lot left out there unless you're willing to overpay in the free agent market. See if there's any other Braves questions. Let me see here. See. Doesn't look like anybody's got anything. But yeah, the big thing, if you're just joining, you're like, what the hell are you doing coming on here? You're just on here yesterday. Atlanta Braves signed Jurickson Profar, left fielder, for a 3-year deal. Looks like it's going to be $42 million, roughly $14 million a season. We'll have to wait till the details come out because they could have pushed some of his money back to where this year's a little cheaper, but we'll see how that actually plays out. But I'm going to go ahead and get off here. Not going to take up your whole night. Just wanted to give you all the news and celebrate with y'all as Atlanta Braves finally woken up. We got Jurickson Profar, and that could start some wheels moving, because after this, there's a very good chance that the Braves, now that they know they have their left fielder, they could start making actual trades and whatnot. Because I've heard a ton of rumors, none of them substantiated, but I've heard a ton of rumors of how close they've been to pulling the trigger on certain trades, and they just felt like they were getting raked over the coals. You get yourself a free agent, and the teams out there no longer feel like that they got your feet over the fire. Y'all have a good one. Good seeing y'all, and we're gonna keep this up. We're gonna restart this thread for the next time something breaks. You'll just go right back into it. So if you see something breaking news like earlier, we talked about this, it'll be a thread that we're waiting for news to drop. We're not doing any more of the regular shows because we're so close to spring training. I did release the first spring training game, by the way. The plan is, assuming we get it, because we do not have full verification of what games everybody's going to be able to get. But the second spring training game of the season is being televised. It's a Sunday afternoon game against Tampa, I believe, and we're going to bring you that. And we're just the rest of them. We're basically waiting to see when the season starts and they say that that this game's being televised. Can we get it? Because the new Braves media deal for the spring is extremely confusing, and no one has an answer on whether or not, if you've got MLB.TV, can you get all these games, or is it going to be localized? So anyways, we'll find that as we go. But the plan is, the ones that I see that I'm pretty darn sure that we're going to have access to, we're doing at least 12, and the idea is to hopefully get about 15 to 16 in this spring. All right, y'all. Good seeing everybody. Smash that like on your way out, and if you haven't subscribed already, do it and hit the alerts, because any other news breaks, we're not planning the show. We're just jumping the hell on. We finally did something. Good night, Irene.